So I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest. He's joined us frequently. Dr. Everett Piper is joining us. Love when he joins us. And I always mention, even though it's only one of his many accomplishments, but he wrote a national bestseller book, Not a Daycare, The Devastating Consequences of Abandoning Truth. He's a former president of the Oklahoma Wesleyan University for 17 years. The Not a Daycare book sprang out of an incident at his university where he was explaining to these students, you didn't come to college to get coddled. You came to learn, to engage in the discussion of ideas, to have the robust debate of ideas, all the things part of Western civilization. That's what prompted the book. He's now a Washington Times columnist, frequent guest on many news shows. And I'm so glad he could join us today. Hello, Dr. Piper.
Thank you, Debbie. By the way, I have a sequel to Not a Daycare coming out, published by Regnery. It'll be out soon, and it's titled Grow Up, and Life Isn't Safe, but it's good. So I'm basically following up on the daycare story with some prescriptions on how to live as an adult in an infantilized world of juvenile pouting and cries for safety.
I love that. In fact, I was trying to write down you're speaking Grow Up, which is it's a good title, Grow Up. And then Life Isn't Safe, but it is good. That's a great title. Okay. Well, actually,
anyway.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. You also have a podcast ongoing, so now you're busy doing your own show, too. You want to tell us a little bit about that before I dive into your two columns I want to talk about?
Well, thank you for allowing me to just say, I have my a daily radio show that broadcasts here in southern Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's called The Rebellion. And in times of universal deceit, truth is the only rebellion left. And that is also featured as a podcast on the Washington Times website.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I saw the list of podcasts there at the Washington Times website. So I have to tell you, I mentioned before we came on air that one of the columns that you wrote, I read the title, I thought, doggone it, I'm going to have to disagree with Dr. Piper on my show. But one of the columns that you wrote is called, Republicans Know That America is Real, while Democrats see it as a subjective idea. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about that and to talk about that title is, I've often made the argument, and I do love making this point about America. I know you actually agree with it, but the idea that I could move to Italy and do whatever is required to become an Italian citizen and learn the language and learn the laws and pass the citizenship test and become a citizen, but I couldn't become Italian because I am not by ethnicity Italian. And what I love about America is, my use of the term is an idea because it's not rooted to a race, ethnicity, or national origin. The identity of America is rooted around the ideas of the founding of America, which you go through in your column. But when I saw that headline, I thought, well, we're going to have to disagree with him. But your point is really well taken. I'd love to have you just start. You took that language about Democrats seeing America as a subjective idea out of the Democrat platform. I'd love to have you just tell us your thinking about going after that provision in their platform.
Well, the very first phrase in their preamble in the Democrat platform is America is an idea. And then they go in and describe what they view in a postmodern Enlightenment way, an arrogant oligarchical way, what America is. All of these abstract concepts. Well, Aristotle and Edmund Burke and Eric Voegelin, all of these conservative thinkers over the course of the millennia have argued that if you want to have a free republic, it has to be grounded in real human experience, the reality of who we are as human beings, the reality of how we live together. We can't ignore tradition and reason. We can't ignore the facts of our existence. We can't construct a republic based on feelings. Like Ben Shapiro says, the facts don't care about your feelings. My argument in this article is Democrats believe in feelings, abstract ideas. They don't ground it in a real constitution, a real declaration, a real nation with real borders and real citizens and real laws and a real existence as human beings. Republicans, conservatives, believe in the objective reality of all these things, a constitution, a country, a nation, of borders and laws. And therefore, when we address the issues like are going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin, we're dealing with it in the context of a real nation, real country with real laws, and we want to correct the problem because we have reality on our side, whereas Democrats just sit back and they fantasize about what they want it to be, and they ignore the human existence, and they ignore who we are as a nation.
I love that point. It's very, very well taken. And, the other thing that is accomplished if you're on the American left, the Democrat side, and you use an idea like that, is that you're not tethered to any principles. You're not tethered to any principle because it's an idea. And so today we wake up, you use the expression emotion. That's exactly right. It's an emotional reaction. Well, today this happened, so the answer has to be this, without tethering to a principle, a sense of ordered liberty, a sense of government. And it really is, in many ways, how the Democrat Party operates. It kind of jumps from crisis to crisis with a emotional reaction and then a solution that they come up with, never ever tethered to all the protections that we have in the founding documents, such as, for example, rule of law, limited government. It's an amazing, they give themselves kind of permission to go wild by calling it an idea that's just untethered.
And Edmund Burke, in his classic work, Reflections on the French Revolution, said that he could see the violence of the Jacobins coming. He could see the blood flowing in the streets and the guillotine because they discarded all the traditions that France as a nation was built upon. They tore it down. They burned the church, they burned the government, they burned the king, they tore it all down. They constructed this new ideology that wasn't tethered to anything but their feelings, their socialist feelings. And Burke said it was inevitable. It was inevitable that everything would collapse and people would lose their heads because you never bow the knee to the rage mob. Never. You never bow the knee to the rage mob, because when you bow, you expose your neck and they're going to have their head. They're going to have your head. You have to ground yourself in the objective facts of God's existence, natural law, common sense, a constitution with a real government, a real nation, and real laws. Otherwise, anarchy prevails. That's what we're dealing with in our culture right now.
We are. And some people who aren't as aware of the ideas that you're sharing, haven't studied them or thought about them, what you get caught up in is the immediacy of the moment, and then a solution that at that very moment sounds pretty good. Well, yeah, that sounds like a better idea. And the extreme one, of course, right now is defunding the police, because you've been worked into a lather over some genuine problems with police brutality and perhaps racist conduct, and many concocted, exaggerated instances that the solution, well, let's just not have police anymore. You can feel like, oh, the Democrats are solving the problem because we've had a bad incident. They're solving it, and Republicans aren't doing that because they're holding on to law. But I say this so often, and much of my public speaking, I don't think the vast majority of people who are thinking that the ideas coming out of the Democrat Party are appealing and would vote for them, I don't think they really want the country, the culture, and the society that you would create if you actually followed the way they govern. You agree with that?
It's almost like, that John Lennon's famous song, which I despise in terms of its symbolism and its lyrics, and imagine.
Yeah.
Well, take that song and just apply it to some of the, imagine there's no police. Well, it's easy if you try. Just look at Kenosha. I mean, look at Portland. Imagine there's no police. It's easy if you try. Well, of course it is. You've got chaos. Again, the United States has a real Army, a real Navy, a real Coast Guard, a real Marines. It has a real Air Force for a reason. It's because we have real enemies who want to destroy us. Reality. Conservatives are grounded in conserving reality. Progressives ignore reality. They construct a new world. They imagine a new world that's based only on their feelings. And history tells us, real history tells us, not contrived postmodern deconstruction of history, real history tells us that when you don't attend to the facts, like C.S. Lewis said, a measuring rod, outside of those things being measured, a real God with a real natural law, because it's endowed to us by our Creator, then blood flows in the streets. And that's what we're dealing with when we address these stories, these news stories that you've highlighted today.
We are dealing with that. It's so deeply troubling. One of the points you make in this article you're contrasting ideas that are nebulous and untethered to, and you use the word real quite frequently. The idea of a real nation, real citizens, and real borders. it is I was really struck by that, thinking of how, when you have the concept of a sovereign nation, you can only be sovereign if you have borders that everyone agrees on the planet that this border surrounds this country and they get to make their rules, and this border surrounds this country and they make their rules. So it's real countries, real borders, real citizens, and then a real concept of citizenship. And when you are not supportive of, when you want to overthrow or fundamentally transform the nation that America is from its founding, it is a great tactic they have come up with, an effective tactic of just trying to introduce the subtle suggestion to American society, borders don't really matter. Isn't it kind of arbitrary? These people coming across the southern border, they're just as nice as we are. And that you gradually work away at the construct of a sovereign nation if you can't agree real borders and a real concept of citizenship. It is actually a brilliant strategy if you want to destroy America.
I would recommend that everybody go get a book that was published about 10, 12 years ago, if my memory is right. It's 10 Books Every Conservative Should Read by Benjamin Wiker, Wiker. 10 books every conservative should read. He highlights the argument that you and I are making right now. He highlights Aristotle and Vogelin and C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton and Edmund Burke. All of them are making the very simple argument. Human existence is grounded in reality. It's not grounded in make-believe, fantasy. And if we ignore reality, we're going to have blood flowing in the streets. It always happens. It always happens. It happened in the French Revolution. It happened in the Bolshevik Revolution. It happened in the Cultural Revolution in Red China. It always happens. Hundreds of millions of people die when we ignore reality and we start living on fantasy. That's the difference between the two parties right now, in my view.
I love that, and I'm taking notes in the books you're suggesting. I already have a pile, by my side of the bed, growing. And I wish I could eliminate the need for sleep, because I would much rather read more than sleep. But your second column I want to talk about today, again, I love your writing in the Washington Times. This one, I'd not even heard this story, but your caption of your article, and again, for everyone listening, you can find this on our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links. The article is captioned, "Paying for the Indoctrination of Hate in Our Children." And I know a lot of people say, oh, come on, they're not really indoctrinating hate, but I want to tell our listeners and then let you talk about it. There's a professor, astonishingly, a professor of philosophy of religion. So, should be somewhat familiar with religion, named Timothy Snedeker. And in July of this year, he's a professor at University of California, Santa Barbara. And in July of this year, he responded to a survey question posted on Twitter that asked this question: if you dropped 2,000 years back in time with nothing but the knowledge you have now, what would you do? And this university professor, Timothy Snedeker, answered that, easy. I would find and assassinate Jesus of Nazareth. This is a professor of religion, philosophy of religion at UC Santa Barbara. And if he could do anything, he'd go back and assassinate Jesus. First of all, I hope he got fired, but I doubt it. But I want to just ask you, how do we even get to the place where someone who thinks like that could be teaching at a college level about philosophy of religion?
Well, this is not unusual. The people listening to the show right now, and I know we've got very limited time to discuss this, but here, if you want to take home on this story, here's my argument. And I think I know what I'm talking about. I spent my entire career leading the ivory tower. Okay, so I know the inside of the beast. I know what goes on inside. This man is not unusual. Yes, he said it in a very aggressive way, but his hatred for Christianity was just expressed very boldly and very crassly in a response to a Twitter. The reality of the American Academy, the reality of secular universities, and unfortunately even some that claim to be Christian, is they embrace this deconstruction of the church, of Christianity. They hate Jesus Christ. And again, Debbie, let's go back to Edmund Burke and his warnings about the French Revolution. What did the revolution, what's one of the take-homes of Diderot in the French Revolution? We will not be satisfied until we strangle the last king by the entrails of the last priest. Their goal was to kill the government by killing the church. Kill the church. Strangle the last king by the entrails of the last priest. And this man from the from the University of California, Santa Barbara, is basically saying, I want to kill Christianity. It has caused more harm, in my view, than any other worldview in the history of mankind. So if I could do anything, if I could get in a time machine and go back 2,000 years, my first thing I would do is kill Jesus. Well, what he doesn't realize is that there were a lot of people back there that wanted to kill Jesus too, but he proved that he's the Son of God and he rises again. So go ahead and kill him if you wish. He will rise again and he will judge up all mankind at the end of days. Christianity wins at the end of time. This man doesn't understand that.
He does not. And you think of all the things you could have said and said. I'm going to go try to find that Twitter feed and see what other people said. But, as to the argument about Edmund Burke and all that, there were people who said, well, part of the problem in France and other places with the religion and church were so intertwined, and part of people's resentment of the government, religion and government were so intertwined, and part of the resentment may have been because church is all mixed up with government. But you come forward today in America where we have we have a government founded on the ideas that we established in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, rooted in Judeo-Christian values, but the church is not government, and the government is not church. But still, this disdain, this just hysterical anger of leftists continues against the church, even in modern America. Here he is. No, the church isn't hurting anybody. The church isn't in the position to force anyone to do anything. It's not in a position to take your life away, take your freedom away. It's a separate. It's not a governmental entity. But still, the hatred for faith is vivid in this guy. And I'll tell you one thought I have about that, and I want to hear why you think why it would still be so vivid today. But the reason, when you're a leftist and you want to have leftist control over society, leftist government controlling everything, and you have a population that actually turns to a higher power for its sense of its beliefs about the nature of life, reality, of truth, of morality, these people, truly religious people, true believers, are not controllable. And when you're a leftist and you want our society to be government controlled, these Christians get in the way. That's what I think causes much of the disdain for religion among leftists in America. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Why he's so mad today?
Well, okay. I know I'm focusing a lot on the French Revolution, but I think
that's great.
What's the difference between the French Revolution and the American Revolution? The French Revolution sought to kill God and elevate man. The American Revolution listened to Edmund Burke and others and realized that if you kill God, you're going to have chaos. You're going to have violence. So if you want a virtuous republic, what did John Adams say? Our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people, and it's wholly inadequate to the government of any other.
Yep.
That's the foundation of the American Revolution, that we need a moral and religious people, and that this Constitution will be wholly inadequate to govern any other. So we have to build our nation in the reality, again, back to my article, the reality of a real God with real laws and real morality, and we're going to ground our real republic in our real Constitution and our real Declaration of Independence in those facts. We're not going to make the mistakes that the French are going to make because they're going the opposite direction. Thankfully, our founding fathers, Jefferson and Franklin and Adams and Washington, understood the difference between grounding your nation in the moral and religious facts of the Christian faith as opposed to what the French were doing.
Absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. It's just and it has something that's been lost, actually, our education system, really for the last, I don't even know what it is, 2 or 3 or 4 decades, where young people are not taught about where the ideas of our founding came from, that our founders actually were a moral and religious people who turned to the scriptures for guidance. And that's what helped them create the documents we have, the country we have. And that has actually been lost and needs to be retaught. I also love, in your article, I want to just commend all the different times in your article that you made reference to different teachings of Jesus. The idea, why would someone in modern America want to go after and criticize Jesus and all these beautiful teachings that that many Christians read and study regularly. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers. I mean, they're just the script, the Gospels are just full of these beautiful teachings, and the idea that that's what he would go destroy, it's just pure evil.
Yeah, he obviously, and this is the key, he's a professor of religion at a university that you all might be sending your kids to, and he believes the Beatitudes. He believes the beauty of the Beatitudes, the selflessness of the Beatitudes, the humility of the Beatitudes, of Jesus' core teachings in the gospel needs to be destroyed. Well, what's he going to replace it with? Power,
Right.
and human arrogance, and that's frightening.
Amen to that. Yep, that is exactly right. Well, Dr. Piper, I love every chance we get to talk. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate that. And again, one quick time for our listeners, how they find you online.
You can just go to Dr. Everett Piper, that's DrEverettPiper.com. That's my website.
Okay, and I encourage people to read your columns in Washington Times. And again, thank you so much for joining me today.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, folks, that's really a gift, a tremendous American, great writer, great thinker, and just honestly, he's provided so much wisdom to students over 17 years at Oklahoma Wesleyan. He's now writing and speaking and putting his own podcasts out. So he's just a gift to have every time he comes on the show.